What's the difference between hydrocortisone and prednisone? Great question, because doctors can prescribe either one for very similar situations. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the differences and similarities between these two medications. This video was triggered by a question from one of my viewers. It says, can you do a video about hydrocortisone versus prednisone? Some endocrinologists seem to prefer hydrocortisone when adrenal insufficiency becomes a problem. My endocrinologist didn't think hydrocortisone would make any difference when I had adrenal insufficiency from long-term prednisone use. The theory was that hydrocortisone was less potent and shorter acting than prednisone. Hydrocortisone was supposed to give my adrenals a nudge to wake up, but I have no idea if that works or not. So let's talk about the differences between these two drugs and then whether a nudge is a legitimate strategy. So the important thing to understand about both of these medications is both hydrocortisone and prednisone are mimicking our body's naturally occurring hormone called cortisol. And because of that, they're actually structurally, on a chemical level, nearly identical. They are really similar to cortisol itself, but to each other, they're only different by a double bond here and a hydrogen there. So it's really just practically one molecule difference. That leads to hydrocortisone being less potent and prednisone being more potent. That means you need less milligrams of prednisone to achieve the same effect as the same amount of milligrams of hydrocortisone. So to be specific, 5 milligrams of prednisone is the same as 20 milligrams of hydrocortisone. You need 4 times more hydrocortisone milligrams to get the same anti-inflammatory effect. That doesn't mean that prednisone works better or anything like that. It just means that the number of milligrams they have to put in the pill to get the same effect is more in the hydrocortisone versus the prednisone. You can't just interchange them one-to-one. You have to have a steroid conversion calculation to switch from one to the other. Another interesting thing is that prednisone has a longer half-life versus hydrocortisone is shorter. What that really means is prednisone can be taken just once a day to give you the anti-inflammatory pain or adrenal relief that you need for the day, as opposed to hydrocortisone has a very, very short half-life. And so you have to take it multiple times a day in order for it to actually still be in your blood. So you'd have to take it, for example, at 8 a.m., 12, and 4 p.m. Or for other people, 6 a.m., 10, 2, and 6 p.m. It depends on your body and your doctor and what condition you're treating, because some people are really fast metabolizers. That means they break down hydrocortisone really fast. And others are really slow metabolizers. So the same amount of drug can last longer in that body versus a fast metabolizer's body. Typically, prednisone is the number one drug used in the United States of America. It is prescribed way more often than any other steroid, corticosteroid, anything like that. It's the simplicity of once-a-day dosing just knocks the others out of the park. Whereas hydrocortisone is usually reserved for special situations. Maybe a person isn't tolerating the once-a-day dosing with prednisone. Maybe they're trying to see if there's different side effects with hydrocortisone. It's hard to say, but it's much more niche. And some of the niches you might see hydrocortisone used in include Addison's disease, adrenal insufficiency, HPA axis support, congenital adrenal hyperplasia. I have the whole textbook by Dr. Peter Hindmarsh. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. So because prednisone lasts longer, it's possible that you can have more side effects that happen as time goes on. For example, if you take prednisone at noon and it's going to last all day, you might have a harder time falling asleep at night and therefore lead to insomnia. As opposed to hydrocortisone, you might have these crashes. So you might be fine and then it crashes, fine and then it crashes. And so it's this roller coaster ride with hydrocortisone often, as opposed to prednisone when you just shoot it way up and then slowly decrease over time. It's tricky either way because neither of them perfectly mimics our body's natural cortisol cycle, which normally is going higher and higher in peaks at about 6 a.m. and then slowly tapers down throughout the day. And by the time the sun sets, it's gone. So essentially, cortisol is mimicking the sun rising and setting. It's really similar to the sun. And it's really hard to mimic that with either of these drugs because one is shooting off the charts and the other one is a roller coaster that doesn't exactly match. Some might think that the hydrocortisone is easier to mimic the natural cycle because a doctor could prescribe a higher dose in the morning, that 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. dose, and then a medium-sized dose at noon, and then a lower dose in the afternoon, evening time, so that theoretically it's kind of like this, boom, boom, boom. That's the idea. And so when the person said, nudge my adrenals awake, might be where that's coming from. The theory is this. Some endocrinologists believe that hydrocortisone's shorter action could allow the adrenal glands to rest intermittently and potentially recover. And therefore, prednisone is causing less rest time. Then there's the debate. On the other side, other endocrinologists say that if adrenal recovery is going to happen, it doesn't matter which steroid you use. Recovery depends more on tapering schedules of the dose itself and individual physiology. So what does the scientific literature actually say about waking up adrenals with hydrocortisone versus prednisone? Currently, there is no evidence or definitive proof that hydrocortisone is better at waking up the adrenals than prednisone. So what can you do? If you're like, I hate prednisone, would hydrocortisone be a better alternative? Maybe, but I have another option that might even be better than that. So I mentioned I would talk about Dr. Hindmarsh again. Professor Hindmarsh in the United Kingdom came up with an innovative strategy. Maybe he did, but he's the one who's been doing a lot of research about it. And that is to use an insulin pump, like the kind you attach to your hip and a little tiny needle inside the skin subcutaneously. It's called continuous subcutaneous hydrocortisone infusion. So you wouldn't be taking the pill, you'd be injecting a tiny bit of liquid under the skin continuously all the time. And the strategy is that you could set up different speeds of infusion to more closely mimic the body's natural hormone cycle. So the trickiest part of hydrocortisone tablet treatment is that between 4 and 6 o'clock in the morning, there's not really any cortisol in your body, like zero. And normally cortisol is one of those things that helps you wake up, helps you have the energy to get out of bed. And if you don't have that there, that cortisol awakening response, then it's hard to awaken and turn on all your body's systems that are supposed to be, triggered. Like in Back to the Future, when the alarm clock goes off and then the toast and the dog food, right? Like all of those things are happening in your body where you would have this awakening response that turns things on, and it can't happen when you're taking the tablets. So maybe if you set up this pump that it's going throughout the night at this super low thing, and then starting at 4 a.m. it goes higher, and then at 6 a.m. even higher, and then it slowly goes at a less and less dose throughout the day. That so much more closely mimics cortisol, right? So that's a pretty cool option. And I was actually on the board of the Adrenal Alternatives Foundation for 5 years, helping support this nonprofit organization get the word out about this really interesting alternative to taking tablets. They've recently rechanged their strategy and their name, but that's why it was called Adrenal Alternatives, because they wanted people who had adrenal diseases like Addison's or congenital adrenal hyperplasia or others to know you're not stuck with the tablets. There are other options. And then there's also compounding pharmacies that can create a specific dose just for you. They can create a sustained release capsule of hydrocortisone. There are so many options out there. I don't want you to feel limited by just the short-acting tablets that just cost pennies but cause thousands of dollars in side effects. So if you want to know how to deal with those side effects, download my Prednisone Checklist. It's a free PDF where I go through all the things that you can do to minimize your side effects while taking prednisone or hydrocortisone, since, as we discovered, they're only really one molecule apart. Signing off as Dr. Megan, your prednisone pharmacist.